In this episode of Locked On Lightning, we continue our player reviews, and in today's episode, we're taking a look back on Mitchell Chaffee's rookie season. How is he going to improve, and where does he fit in his second season in the NHL? All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's episode, we're continuing our player reviews, taking a look back on Mitchell Chaffee's rookie season. How does he fit into the Lightning's plans in year two, as well as our expectations for him in his sophomore season. Before we get into any of those topics, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast wherever podcasts are provided in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. Drop a comment below. And this was an episode I almost forgot, and I think a lot of people forget when they look back on the Lightning season. I feel like a lot of us, when we look at the Lightning season, Mitchell Chaffee, as well as I think a lot of us thought he played, I think we could all agree that it wasn't as memorable of a season as it really was more so a stretch last couple of weeks of the season for him, as well as here and there in the playoffs, which really wasn't much there for him. And really, unfortunately, that's the thing that I think a lot of people will remember in really going into his second season when we talk about Mitchell Chaffee. And really, we can't blame him because he played 30 games, only had 4 goals and 7 points. And yeah, he played a majority of the third line minutes there on his time in the NHL. But I will say for Chaffee that really what I really liked, and I know it sounds cliche to say this, but it's 100% true. I liked not how he started his season, but really how he finished it. And that's something that you really have to take into account when you're evaluating a player, especially one as young in their career as Chaffee is. Prior to his season in Tampa Bay, he only played 2 games in Minnesota. But I will say that looking, and this was in 21-22, so I still consider him a rookie, even though it may not really, I don't know if his status has been changed, but I will say this much is that he was as mature for a player in their first 32 games as we have seen in quite some time. That was really not someone who was a superstar. I think that when you look at those last couple of weeks of the season, as well as even in the playoff games, I mean, he played 5 games, didn't put up any points or really anything of note. I still think when you look at him and the little plays that he made, because if you've been a listener and a watcher of this show for quite some time, you know that I view, or even the last couple of years, I view the game as not one in one play or in one shift. I view it as kind of a chess match. Literally, you make little incremental moves up the ice and really, even if you don't score on a certain sequence, you could always take something away from that. And I always thought that with players especially, you may have heard it on some of the past episodes that I've done with maybe Tanner Janot or Anthony Sorelli, some of these other Nick Paul, some of those other player reviews. But really what I always say, and I've probably have said to exhaustion on this podcast of certain players, is that they do the little things that contribute to the team winning over time, or at least having a chance of winning. And that's really what Chaffee did. You know, even if it wasn't spectacular on paper, for what you got out of him for about 11 minutes or so per game on average this year on the third line, I thought, you know, that was best case scenario for a guy that really played 30 games. And I really thought his presence on that third line really complemented Eyssimont and Paul. And you know, even though I did talk a lot about in the Eyssimont episode and the Paul episode, especially Nick Paul, where I said, if you haven't listened to that or watched it, please go ahead and check back on all of those episodes. I had blast doing them, and we're not even nearly done. I said on the Nick Paul episode that I think this is the year, next season, is when you move him up to the second line. You move Sorelli up to the first. And then you kind of fill in the pieces from there. Especially with maybe we could have Eyssimont on the center position in the third line. Maybe put another guy in the wing. But if you're the Lightning coaching staff and you're looking at your third line next season, and you're saying, we would like to see Mitchell Chaffee grow more, but as long as Nick Paul is on that line, that's the only way we could see it, then I'm all for it. I don't, and I will say, and we'll talk more about this in the second segment, where we're talking about, you know, plans for the future. I know I'm a little jumping the gun here, but I think that even though we've spoken about on past episodes about, you know, Tanner Janot or other guys maybe getting some more ice time on the higher lines just to kind of complement the scores, something that we're starting to see across the NHL now. You know, it's not the stereotypical your first two lines are your best lines and it's all scores. No, you got to kind of mix it up and distribute the wealth up and down the lineup. I don't think that really pertains to Chaffee because I just don't know where you fit him at this point. We'll talk about that in the second segment. But so far, like I said, I really liked his level of play. I really liked his aggressiveness. I really thought that he matured very quickly for someone who had so little ice time and so little time in general at the NHL level to be able to figure things out on his own. And I think that really, you know, sometimes that doesn't work with young players, you know, throwing them right into the fire, but having a guy like that with his maturity level, like I said, that was the big thing. I really think that is something that all Lightning fans could really be positive about going into the future, especially next season. So coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about where does he fit into the plans for next season, as well as later on expectations for 2024-25. So let me know in the comments below, how'd you feel about his season? My grade for his season, I would say, you know, and this is no reflection on him, maybe a C, just because we don't know. Like I said, we didn't really get a big sample size, and what we got from him it didn't exactly blow me out of the water. And I kind of use the C grade as kind of like an in between, kind of a not bad but not a good, kind of just an kind of season. So let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on that? And coming up in a little bit, we're going to talk about where he fits into the Lightning season. But first, we're going to talk about one of our sponsors, and that is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So, as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so subscribe to our channel there. Drop a comment below, and make sure to like the video. You can follow us on our social media pages, LO_Lighting on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lighting on Instagram. You can give me a follow on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. So we just got done talking about his season, Mitchell Chaffee's season. It was there was I will say there was nothing really particularly bad about it that I could really think of. Then again, there wasn't I don't think the Lightning really gave him a lot of room to make enough mistakes to where it would really kind of leave a bad taste in our mouth. And I think that sometimes that's a good thing, protecting your rookies. At the same time, I think the Lightning, for the most part, they find the good balance when it comes to their rookies, in ultimately just protecting them, throwing them in spots that they think are going to be successful in, but at the same time, it's not going to kill their confidence. And I think that's really the important thing, especially when playing time over the last couple of years for rookies hasn't really been guaranteed for forwards. I mean, defensemen, it's a little bit different, guys going down all the time, roster changes here and there. It's a little different there. But I really think that what the Lightning did, which is something I really don't say a lot of on this podcast because it's true, they used Mitchell Chaffee right. And I hope that next season they continue to do so, to put him in good situations in order for him to flourish and develop even more into a player. We talk about him as if he's this fresh-faced 21-year-old out of college or out of the minor leagues, but he is 26. He's going to be 27 this upcoming season. So actually, specifically enough, he will be 27 in January. So, not young, but also not old, but still in a good position of his career where I think he's raw enough to where he could become a solid bottom six player. Unless he completely blows us away this year and has a completely unbelievable season, I think that's really what his ceiling is, a bottom six player. I can't really see or really see anything higher than that right now. But I will say, I think that is the next step for him this season, is to kind of develop him into kind of that third line anchor, that guy that, the Lightning could kind of turn their backs on and allow him and Esamont to kind of get things going, and whoever you throw in on that third line, whether it be from free agency or from the minors, it's going to be an interesting combination to see what the Lightning come up with on opening night. But with Chaffee, I would like to see him put in some situations where he's able to kind of develop his offensive game, or at least get better looks in order to get some more scoring, because I think that's really the next step for him. This year, really, you didn't really see much out of him offensively. Like I said before, 4 goals, 7 points. So really nothing too crazy to write home from right about at home. But I mean, the 4 goals, it's enticing. I like to also think that those 4 goals, Nick Pohl has a little bit to do with that as well. But I think at the same time, I think you got to give him, some sort of credit where credit is due, and realize, there is a little bit something there. We just need to see more of it in order to kind of figure out what kind of player he is. And I think that's really what it is, not only for us as fans and people who watch the Lightning on a nightly basis, but also for the Tampa Bay Lightning in general. I'm not convinced that they are really sure what kind of player he is. I think right now, if you had to put a label on him, though, I would say he's probably solid third line player who's going to throw his weight around, who's going to make the big hits here and there. He's going to clean up along the boards, and a guy who's going to make, physicality a part of his game. And that's great to hear, especially out of a guy who really, like I said, and we've been reiterating throughout the entirety of this episode, that hasn't gotten a lot of chances. And I think that this year he's going to get let out of the barn. I think John Cooper and co are really going to just let him run ragged and see what happens. I'm really excited to see him play alongside more alongside in terms of an 82 game season. I'm really excited to see him play alongside Esamont for a full season and see how that combination works out. The reason why I'm not saying Nick Pohl is because I'm not entirely sure if we're going to have Nick Pohl on the third line. I would preferably like to open up the season with Pohl on the second line. If somehow at this time, things change later at this time, in my opinion, the Stamkos coming back, unless he takes a ridiculous discount, I don't see him coming back to where both parties are satisfied, or without making a huge trade that alleviates some more cap space. But if Stamkos does come back, and we talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, or at least a lot of you commented on, I guess, something I said. It was probably pertaining to the Cirelli preview, where I said I would like to see Cirelli on the first line. And then it was probably followed up by the Pohl, or vice versa, where I said Pohl should be on the second line. So if Stamkos were to come back, that leaves Stamkos, in my opinion, on the third line, which I don't think is the end of the world or a crazy statement. A lot of you used the argument, well, he scored 40 goals this year and all this and that, and that's great. That's a phenomenal. And this goes back to my point, what I said before, that the NHL is evolving. Starting to be gone are the days of teams rolling out stereotypical lines. Your bottom six kind of just do the dirty work and really just cause chaos, especially your fourth line forwards. That's going away. You're going to really just go out there, have maybe guys that could play a little bit more physical playing alongside your scorers and your best players, and that's that. And really, you're going to distribute the wealth, like I said before, throughout your four lines. And I think that if you're a Lightning fan, I think you kind of should, in my opinion, you should be hoping not only that Steven Stamkos comes back, but you should also be hoping that he plays on the third line. Because think about this combination. I mean, I don't know what's wrong about it. I mean, how many teams could say that they got a 40-goal scorer on their third line, where you could kind of live with that? Because, you look at the other lines, or if you want to look at the GM episode that I put together in the beginning of the offseason, that's not necessarily a bad thing to have. You have Stamkos on the wing, at times taking faceoffs, Esamont playing down the middle, on the other side with Chaffee. The only positive I see coming out of that is Chaffee and Esamont's numbers go through the roof, because everyone on the ice is going to be worried about Stamkos taking one-timers, which I hope that's not the case, because I hope that, like we saw last year, his game evolves and continues to evolve. And, he's not just waiting in that circle, just kind of just slowing the entirety of the offense down, where really at the end of the day, everybody knows where the puck is going, if that's the case. That's definitely a move and an outlook that you want to use sparingly here and there. It's kind of your ace in the hole, but I think that will really help out a guy like Chaffee and especially Esmont. Those two guys get going and really build that chemistry in terms of scoring and really that confidence as well. I think that, you know, you have a guy like Stamkos not only on the ice being able to really be the decoy almost at times, but also allow or really go out there and teach these guys certain things that, you know, maybe that they probably wouldn't get otherwise if they were playing with Nick Paul. No disrespect to him. So I think that's something that a lot of Lightning fans should consider. If Stamkos, for whatever reason, doesn't come back, obviously we'll talk about that, what that means for pretty much the whole team when it does. But I think at the end of the day, I think really where he fits, Mitchell Chaffee in year 2 is on the third line as a physical player who really, as the season goes on, you want to build up his confidence. You want to give him more offensive looks, more sequences that are maybe centered around him and Esmont as well. So let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on that? And coming up in just a little bit, as we always do on these player reviews, we wrap it up with some expectations for 2024 and 25. But we're wrapping things up as well with our last sponsor of the day, and that is our friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So we're wrapping things up with some player expectations here for Mitchell Chaffee in 2024-25. Before I get into all of that, please go ahead and check out my work over at Bolt by the Bay. We're talking about Anthony Cirelli. We'll probably put up an article at some point as well about Mitchell Chaffee because he's a very interesting case study as well. But my expectations for Mitchell Chaffee kind of go hand in hand with really what I discussed just a couple of seconds ago with where he really fits. And really that's, I expect him to be physical, not overly physical. I'm not expecting him to check people through the boards and to the front row or whatever, or even go out there and have a fight every single night or whatever. I don't want him to have kind of the role what we saw from some players in the past like Pat Maroon or Luke Shen. No, I don't want that, especially a guy this young. I think that really that would be wasted upon a player like that. And plus there's enough tough guys on this team where Chaffee doesn't necessarily need to be that guy. And really the Lightning are a team that also I don't think that a lot of teams are really going after like that anymore, at least. My expectations as well for him, of course, are to build upon what he had this past season. So really, you know, I really want to measure my expectations in terms of points for him because at this time it is very it's very murky as to what that third line may look like. It really, in my opinion, depends on what happens with the Steven Stamkos deal. And that's the thing that really kind of sucks about it is that we have to wait until the Lightning figure out, you know, whether or not they can move someone from now until the end of the summer in order to make way for him to come back to Tampa Bay, as well as, you know, who knows, maybe, like I said, maybe this is just wishful thinking, but maybe Stamkos will come back just for kind of just a little bit amount of money just so he could put to bed rumors and, you know, just stay with the team that he's been with his entire career. I mean, who knows? We'll see. I don't know. And I don't even think the Lightning do either, to be honest. But I think if you get Stamkos back, and even if you do, and he doesn't play on the third line and you have Nick Paul there with Mitchell Chaffee, I think still we will see an uptick in points. for Mitchell Chaffee. I really think we do. If I had to guess, if you're gun to my head putting a number on it, I'd probably say 20 points, maybe a little more. Now, this is all dependent on whether or not he plays a full 82 game season. I think that he proved to the Lightning as well as a lot of fans last year that he should get a shot at an 82 game season. Now, the only thing there now that we might kind of see now with players that don't have that much experience at the NHL level that are suddenly thrust into full-time business is that we might very well see injuries, which that's just something that their body is not used to, and boom, it breaks down. That's just something that happens, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I still believe that I think come the end of the next season, 2024-25, I think Mitchell Chaffee will have 20 points. I would really like to see 10-10 minimum. And what I mean by that, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, 10 goals, 10 assists. I think that's reasonable. I would like to see that ice time a little bit higher, maybe 12 and a half, 13. I think he's earned that trust now. And, would like to see him on the PK too, just, because I think he plays solid enough defense. As well against the bigger teams, I think we might see him on the PK just so, because he's able to handle that onslaught. For those of you who don't know, Chaffee's 6'1", 192, so pretty solid body right there for someone who could definitely throw it around. So, yeah, that's, little expectations here and there for him. Now, anything in that conversation that he eclipses statistically or in just general expectations is a plus, I think, for the Lightning, considering also what he is making. He's making $800K and becomes a free agent after next year. So, yeah, let me know in the comments below, what are your expectations for him? And coming up on tomorrow's show, I think we will get together and talk about, I would say let's go with Jonas Johansson. I think that's a good kind of segue there. Jonas Johansson, really huge part of the Lightning team to start the season, kind of faded away as the season went on for obvious reasons. So join us on that episode as we will be talking about the backup goaltender for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.